Hello everyone, welcome back to Wallace's, where today we are going to talk about gardening in the shade. A lot of us that have yards that face north or that we just have lots and lots of shade, we think, oh gosh, I can't have color or I don't have as much to work with because I have a shade garden. And I want to share some plants with you today that will show you that that is not true and that there is life after hostas. Every house that I've owned as an adult has had lots and lots of mature trees, including where I live right now. So I am doing a lot of shade gardening. One way that we introduce a lot of people to shade gardening is that they have tried for years and years to get grass to grow under trees in their front yard, and they come in and they're frustrated because grass seed's not germinating, or it does, and then by the middle of summer when the trees fill out, the grass fades away and it's thin and muddy and it just doesn't work. Grass in general likes to grow in the sun, and so if you have less than 5 to 6 hours of sun in an area, grass isn't going to do it. So it's time to look into shade perennials, shade annuals, and see what you can plant that is going to flourish and do well and make your landscape look pretty. So we are all familiar with hostas, right? They come in greens and golds and blues. They're really, really great. They bloom nice, big, tall scapes of flowers in the summer. They're kind of indestructible. Anybody can grow them, and they do well in the shade. But we get a little tired of them after a while. So I want to share some other plants you may not know that are wonderful to mix with hostas or to plant all on their own. The first ones being these beautiful Columbine. These are a great native woodland plant. They bloom in the spring and they have these huge, really showy flowers in lots of bright spring colors. This is a pink and rose and yellow, lots of bright blues and whites, reds and whites, just really pretty mixed together. And they do also seed themselves. So when you plant this as a perennial, you may end up the next year with even more plants than you originally started with, because they will drop seed and grow even more plants. It's a really great way to add some early spring color and liven up your garden right away off the bat. Another plant that I love is the false forget-me-not, or Brunnera. It gets its name, false forget-me-not, because the flowers are this bright blue, very delicate, and they look like forget-me-not flowers. This plant has a habit like a hosta, so a nice big large mound. One great thing about it is it's very deer resistant and rabbit resistant, because the leaves are fuzzy, almost scratchy, and so it's not something they like to eat. And then they also have this silver overlay, so it's going to catch light and really show up in a dark area of the garden, and that is Brunnera. Bleeding hearts are some of the most popular shade plants. You may be familiar with the larger leafed, big, tall bleeding hearts. They get almost shrub sized. This is a miniature one, and the difference between the two is that the old-fashioned large bleeding hearts bloom heavily in the spring, and then they kind of fade away in the summer. They're ephemeral, in that they just kind of fade away, stop blooming, and disappear in the garden until next spring. The miniature bleeding hearts will actually bloom most of the season. So they'll bloom real heavy in the spring and then sporadically throughout the summer with a little bit shorter flower spikes, but just kind of a cute, dainty little pink flower. And then the foliage is kind of this icy blue, a little bit green, real fern-like, soft, delicate foliage. With lots and lots of detail. This is a great texture to mix in with the large leaved hostas that you probably already have, because it just provides a great contrast between the real soft, frilly bleeding heart and your large, coarse textured hosta. So if you are finished trying to grow grass and you have decided finally to try growing some ground cover instead, first of all, before you get started, you may want to go ahead, use a grass killer or just black fabric, cover up what's left there and kill that off, get it out of your way, create a blank canvas, and then start thinking about what shade ground covers you can plant. The first one I'm going to talk about is Lamium, and this comes, it's a silver foliage, really nice and full, and this will spread out about 2 feet in any direction. So really nice coverage from this. Comes with either a white bloom, a pink bloom, or a purple bloom. I like the purple dragon is my favorite one, and it's kind of got that scratchy, velvety texture to it that tends to keep away rabbits and deer. Just a nice kind of soft silver ground cover that's going to reflect light and be really low maintenance. Some other great ground covers that bloom are going to be Ajuga or bugleweed. That has typically a blue flower spike in the spring And then later, again in the fall, when weather cools off. This is going to be a heavily spreading plant. You can see from here that this plant is just dying to go in the ground. You can buy them as a 6-pack, you can buy them as an individual plant and plant them about 12 inches apart, and they will grow into each other and form a nice mat in your shady areas with a nice pretty bloom for the spring, and then a real deep kind of evergreen, almost a bronzy green, a nice mat of foliage for the rest of the season. This is Lamium, otherwise known as Sweet Woodruff. It is fragrant. I love the texture on this because it has this kind of palmate leaf, and then out of the whorl of the center of that leaf comes these little white, real dainty flowers. As a shade gardener, I always say that if you're a shade gardener, you have to love detail. These are not 55-mile-an-hour plants. They're not something that your neighbors are going to have to slow down their cars to go, oh wow, look at all that color. But when you get into the shade garden, when you see all these details like the dainty white flowers and the blue columns and the different leaf arrangements, that's when you really start to appreciate the different types of plants that you can grow in the shade. One of my last favorite ground covers, and this is one that's a little bit more rare and hard to find. This is European ginger. And it has a leaf shape, kind of like a lotus plant, which is great if you're trying to do any kind of Japanese gardening or small miniature bonsai gardening. The ginger is a wonderful little accent to that. And just these cute little green leaves forms a nice little mat. Slow growing, so be a little more patient with the ginger, but it is one that you don't see very often and will often spark conversation in the garden. Another early blooming spring perennial that I love is lungwort or pulmonaria. And this has kind of these kind of watercolored flowers. They're usually in pinks, like real deep pinks, pale pinks, or kind of vibrant blues and purples. Blue is a color we don't get very often in the garden, but when you're a shade gardener, there's lots and lots of blue flowers, blue Columbine, blue Brunnera, blue Ajuga, so you do get that blue color when you're a shade gardener. Another great thing about pulmonaria is the leaves. If you feel them, they have kind of a velvety, but more of a scratchy feel to them, which makes them deer resistant, slug resistant, and also rabbit resistant. They don't like to eat leaves that have this texture to them. The other cool thing about it, again, is detail. These really cool spotted patterns on the foliage just make for a really interesting plant, whether it's in bloom or not. The last shade perennial I'm going to talk to you about today is Jacob's Ladder. Been around for a long time, but there are so many different varieties out there. This is one called Purple Rain. It's got a really nice bluish purple, almost a violet-like flower that sticks up well above the foliage. It's called Jacob's Ladder because of the unique foliage. It has these opposite leaves that look like a ladder coming out. And this plant also comes in a variegated version. So if you want to get some extra light color in there, there are some variegated ones like Brise d'Anjou or Canary Feathers that are really pretty as well. There are so many other shade perennials that do well that we haven't talked about today. I would encourage you to stop into our greenhouse, talk with our nursery experts, and we can tell you about them. We grow over 20,000 perennials here every year at Wallace's, and we love to find the more unique varieties, as well as the ones that when we visit trials, we know that they're going to perform, they're going to do well in our Midwest landscapes. And we can help you find something unique and different and move beyond the hosta in your shade garden.